Welcome to this week's edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My name is Gene Barr. I'll be your host for this week's show. Today we're going to tell you a few things about the Pennsylvania National Guard you might not know, and we're going to talk about the current status of higher education in Pennsylvania, and it starts right after this.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My first guest today is Major General John Pippy, who is the Adjutant General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. General, thanks for being with us today.
Gene, thanks for having me.
We're really glad to have you here. So, tell people, what is the Adjutant General's job in Pennsylvania?
The Adjutant General, first, a lot of people don't realize it's a cabinet position. I have the privilege of serving under Governor Shapiro, who selected me to be the Adjutant General, who has responsibility over 18,000 Army and Air Service members, and then over 2,800 Commonwealth employees, where we provide 6 veterans homes, all the veterans outreach for over 700,000. So if you look at the national level, it's almost a combination of the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff and the head of the Veterans Affairs. But in Pennsylvania, they all fall under one command, and it's a wonderful, really inspiring and just wonderful position.
I'd forgotten about the fact that it's also the Veterans Affairs
Right.
side, which is critical. And of course, people might not realize you also have not only the ground troops, but the air wing
Yes,
as part of that as well. And people probably don't recognize that.
4,000 airmen that across Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh, and Penn State. So we're all over the Commonwealth.
Okay. How does the Guard differ from the Army Reserve? I think some people tend to use those interchangeably. How do they differ?
So we are both part of the reserve component of the military. And so when activated, we will go and serve in our military capacity. What's unique about the Guard is that we are Pennsylvania's military. When we're in state status, which is the majority of the time, like I am right now, we serve under the direction of the governor, and we're there to protect our communities, property, maintain peace, if necessary, respond to weather events and other things. So think of us as Pennsylvania's military, but then when the president of the military needs us, we get called up and then we go and serve.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but first, you have a very interesting background yourself. So I've known each other for a number of years. You were a member of the Pennsylvania House,
Yes.
a member of the Pennsylvania Senate.
Yeah.
You were an advocate for the energy industry.
Yes.
And I know that you were, during your time in the legislature, you were deployed overseas, had to juggle that job with deployment and, of course, having a family.
Right.
So you've got an incredible background.
I've been really lucky that I've always worked with a lot of great teams, and for me, it's always been about the service aspect. I became a legislator when I got off active duty, moved back to Pittsburgh. My wife Kathy and I was working for U.S. Steel, and
Forgot about that part of it.
And they wanted, and they were looking for someone to run for office, and I was 25, wasn't thinking about it, and my wife mentioned, "Oh, Johnson would be a great candidate." And I think I've told you a story, and so one of the great things about the military is that sense of purpose and sense of service. And I remember I did a little research and found out Pennsylvania's legislature was full time, which isn't the norm. And I said, "Honey, you realize?" But I went after it because I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, and so I was honored to serve 16 years in the legislature and House and Senate, and then as you get more higher in military, it becomes a little more challenging. A lot of you mentioned family, military, legislator. That's a lot of weekend time, and so I had to make a choice, and for me it was easy, continuing obviously with the family and then in the military, and I think it worked out great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about that history of the Guard in the next segment, so we're going to go to that. But before we go, I think some people don't understand how many things about the Guard. We were talking earlier about the movie Saving Private Ryan, and some of the first troops on were National Guard units, but from other states. But we're going to talk about the history of this Guard, which has an illustrious history. So we're going to do that right after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, And by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're here with Major General John Pippy, who's Adjutant General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, General, before we left, we were talking about the history of the Pennsylvania National Guard, and it turns out it's even older than the country itself, right?
It is one of the oldest in the nation. Massachusetts likes to go go to about 1600s, but we claim 1747. Okay. It's a strong claim because it's Benjamin Franklin established the Associators to protect Philadelphia. So they created a militia to protect Philadelphia from raiders and French privateers. Okay. And then across the Commonwealth, that's when you would see the rest of the other units start to get stood up. So that's 1747. We just celebrated the 250th birthday of the Army. Well, when they established the Continental Congress, it was the first troop of Philadelphia, our light cavalry, who still exists today.
Correct. One of the most colorful units.
They've done every presidential inauguration for generations. Yes. But they escorted Washington through New York to his command. So we were there at the birth of our nation. So we always like to brag when they talk about crossing the Delaware. Those are Pennsylvania Guardsmen that were on that boat. Okay,
and of course it didn't end with that. There were, I'm sure, Guard troops that fought through the Revolution itself.
Yes.
And of course, on through the Civil War, there are some units that can trace their lineage through that up to today. But also, the Guard's 28th Division has an incredible history, particularly as it relates to World War I and World War II, right?
It's the oldest serving division in the Army. Pershing commanded us during World War I in the Argonne, and because of the bravery and the toughness of the Pennsylvania soldiers, General Pershing, called the 28th Infantry Division his Iron Division. So we have held that. And then obviously during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, once again, the Iron Division and took heavy losses fighting off a German attack, and it was critical to the success, involved with a lot that was going on with the 101st at that time at the Battle of the Bulge. So Pennsylvania has always been there. We're always ready, and we'll always be there.
And for those who are familiar with the insignia, the enemy sometimes called it the Bloody Bucket, unfortunately, because of the losses that those troops endured.
Yeah. It was a proud red keystone, and we proudly wear that red keystone not only on our shoulders but also on our vehicles, because we are continuing the legacy of those who have gone before us.
And a lot of that tie, of course, continues with the deployments. So you've gone overseas, many of your colleagues have, and these are our neighbors who are being deployed in the middle of their lives, with families back home have to take a year, et cetera, off. And we all know some of them. Hopefully our communities are supporting them, but there's still some of that going on, correct?
Yeah, we as a matter of fact, this afternoon I'll be welcoming about 1,000 soldiers that are coming back from the Horn of Africa. Okay. And Pennsylvania is one of the most heavily deployed guards in the nation, just because of our size. We're the second largest Army Guard and the fourth largest Air Guard. So we are continuously doing missions. That's one of the neat things about the Guard, and I think a differentiator for us is that community connection. The support in Pennsylvania is so tremendous. From the governor to the legislature to our neighbors to every association, when they see a guardsman or a soldier or airman, they're very supportive, and that's one thing I'm real proud of, to be part of that.
Well, Pennsylvania should be proud of their Guard as well. One of the things that I found interesting, too, that I've heard a few years ago and actually met with some was, you have a unique relationship with the Lithuanian National Guard. How did that start?
So in 1993, the State Department created a state partnership program, and they realized that we need to develop long-term relationships. And in this case, it was Eastern Bloc nations. So us, the Baltics, it was Lithuania. We were one of the original 9. And originally, it was military-to-military cooperation to help learn from them, they learn from us. Western and Eastern militaries coming together to make a stronger force. Now, over 31 years now, or 32 years, that it is now a much stronger and personal, they're our brothers and sisters. Yeah. Our ag secretary's been over there, community and economic development. So we have a very tight relationship, and we work with the Lithuanian Army right now. They're standing up at division headquarters. They haven't had one since World War I. 28th Infantry Division is providing support to that division headquarters. We regularly meet. I'll be in Germany next week, meeting with U.S. Army Europe and NATO.
They still train out at the Gap?
They train at the Gap. We train with them in Germany. They support us on certain deployments. Great. So it's a really strong bond. And through that, we also learned of the Lithuanian presence in the U.S.
Yes.
A lot of them emigrated.
True.
Yeah. So
thank you, General. Thanks for being with us. Hope to talk to you again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about higher ed in Pennsylvania, and we'll do that after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My next guest is Tom Foley. Tom is president of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities in Pennsylvania. Tom, thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here, Gene.
So I'll call it the acronym ACUP.
ACUP.
What is ACUP? What do you guys do?
Sure. ACUP is actually 85 independent nonprofit colleges in Pennsylvania. These are the schools that are not state funded. 270+ thousand students. They're about half of all the students pursuing higher education in Pennsylvania. Okay. 47% of all the kids who are considered low income are in those schools. Conceptually, I think of it as it's one of those really unique assets. You and I have worked with a ton of economic development groups and partnerships. We're always looking for something unique that can distinguish Pennsylvania. And higher education in general, not just the independent nonprofits in Pennsylvania, is a real asset compared to other states. It's the 5th largest industry in Pennsylvania. Our state, the Wall Street Journal does their list of the 500 best colleges in America. Pennsylvania is number 3 on that list. And 28 of the 32 schools that make that list are independent nonprofit schools in Pennsylvania. Yeah. We are, I think, the second best net importer of students in the country. Behind only most of the time New York, every once in a while Massachusetts sneaks ahead of us. Yeah. And again, that's because we have this unique asset. And the independent nonprofits are probably not as well known. They're generally smaller schools, but boy, they pack a mighty punch together. Their economic impact in this state is huge.
Now, you're very well qualified for this position, I would say, because you have been a university president.
I have been a university president. So
you know the challenges, you know the ins and outs of the job.
I've had some tough jobs, and Michelle doesn't always agree with me. You know my wife, Michelle. I think being university president was maybe the toughest job I ever had, but certainly one of them.
Which college?
It was called Mount Aloysius.
Mount Aloysius.
Very typical of probably 50 of our schools. The average age of these schools, Gene, is 140. Mm-hmm. And I listened to General Pippy, loved hearing that. We have 2 schools that are older than this Commonwealth, you know.
Which are?
Penn and Franklin and Marshall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. Literally founded before the Commonwealth. Yes. But yeah, it's. I feel like the best qualifications for me are having been a college president, but also having been a Secretary of Labor and Industry. Mm-hmm. So we're on both sides of that, future workforce divide. At Labor and Industry, as you well remember, Gene, from your work at the Chamber, we're all about preparing kids, students, adults for their first job.
Correct.
Higher education we're trying to prepare them for the 5th, 6th, or 7th job, which is the reality in this economy.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenge, and let's be honest, there are challenges for higher ed right now. Here in Pennsylvania, we've got a declining birth rates. We're kind of maybe not stagnant, but we're growing certainly in this state at a lower rate than others. And we've seen how that has resulted at the Pennsylvania state system. They've had to consolidate and are even talking about closing. So you guys, I guess, are going through some of the same challenges.
Sure. It's across the board, and it's not state or regional, it's national. We're coming up on they call it the second demographic cliff, Eugene, from next year until 2036, we'll lose 10% of the college-age going population. That's going to affect everybody. For us, the biggest challenge is how do we find more efficiencies? Because that's what enabled these schools to keep their costs low.
We're going to talk about those.
Sure.
We're going to take a quick break and come back, and I want to get more into that. We'll be right back after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My guest is Tom Foley. Tom's president of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities in Pennsylvania. And before we broke, Tom, we were talking a little bit about some of the challenges that you guys are seeing as well. And there's even been some consolidations within your membership in higher ed in Pennsylvania, correct?
That's correct. I would say two things, Gene. One is there are going to be mergers, both in the public side and the independent nonprofit side. The challenge is to do them right. St. Joe's, Villanova, two models. They've both done 2 mergers each. They've done them properly. They've taken care of the students. They've taken care of the faculty and staff, and that's the way to do it. The other comment I would make on that is, for us, it's all about efficiencies. Even though these schools are not a system in a traditional sense, they buy their energy together. They buy their cybersecurity together.
Interesting.
They invest their retirement funds together. They buy their software together. We have 28 programs where they are working collaboratively.
This is through your organization?
This is through us.
So they get economies of scale out of the membership.
You got it. Big time. And finding more of those so we can help them. I mean, one of the ways that this is a unique asset and why we are able to recruit so many out-of-state students is we're way below the national average of true net cost and fees for going to these schools. We're about 25% below the national average. And that's because of all of these efficiencies that have been built in. So one of our challenges as the demographic cliff comes is to find more ways to be more efficient.
And of course, we've all heard, look, it's not getting cheaper. We know it's getting more expensive. Lots of reasons for that, et cetera. And there's ways of financing that. Anecdotally, I've heard that what some parents and students are doing is, say, rather than going to a 4-year school out of high school, they might go to a community college for a couple of years and then transfer. Are you guys seeing that? Is that something you're having to deal with, or is that just
Absolutely, and that's long term. I'm from a huge family. 3 of my siblings started in community college. Our schools have what are called articulation agreements, Eugene, so they work with our 14, 15 community colleges and put agreements in place ahead of time on engineering, on nursing, on computer science. Some of those agreements result in lower tuition, but we literally have over 300 articulation agreements between community colleges in Pennsylvania and these 85 schools. So that's a long-term good thing.
Okay. And earlier you had referenced the whole workforce issue that you and I have both been involved in for a number of years, particularly you with your time as a Secretary of Labor and Industry. How have your schools had to change? Have they had to make adjustments in curriculum in order to adapt to new industries, whatever that is, or in order to adapt to the new demographic? What kind of changes have you guys had to make?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and definitely changes. But I think it's always important to remind people, right today, 69% of our students, this is National Department of Education data, are in what are considered career-directed majors. So they're in health sciences, computer science, business, et cetera. So they're already there. 68% of Pennsylvania's nurses come out of these schools. 46% of our teachers, 55% of our STEM employees. So they're very focused that way. But they do other things. We have 9 small business development centers right on our campuses, spread regionally across the state. But I just tell you one quick story. We did a lot of health sciences, a lot of nursing at Mount Aloysius, and I used to meet with the nurses at the beginning of their time. We made them take computer courses when they came in and when they left, and we made them take some liberal arts courses. They got to take English and a couple other things. Why are we doing that? They understood why they were taking computer courses when they did their first clinical, and everything is this, putting all that information on the patients. They still didn't get why do we have to take English and everything. By the time they graduated, they had a much better sense because the kinds of care changed dramatically even in the course of their 2 or 4 years with us. And the kind of confidence you develop in building that architecture in your brain to learn helped them when these new developments came to say, I can handle that. I can figure out what to do here because I've done it in other areas. And as you know, learning how to learn is the new prerequisite for anybody coming into the workforce.
And there is that ongoing discussion about what is the value of liberal arts as we get much more career and technical oriented. And a lot of that is good, let's be honest. A lot of that is very good. But I'm sure you would answer in the affirmative to this. There is still a value in a liberal arts education.
I say 2 things, Gene. One, if you care about money, it's about money. Every study shows in your life you're going to make well over $1 million more if you have a college degree. Every study. But the other thing that I point to is citizenship, Eugene. Pew does these kinds of studies. And it turns out, people who have gone on for further education after high school, they vote 50% more times. They're 3 times more likely to return to their hometown and start a business. They're twice as likely to serve on a local, school board or something like that. And going all the way back to the founders, I loved that General Pippy quoted or talked about Ben Franklin, because Ben Franklin's the one who said education is the best investment for long-term dividends. He actually said that, however many years ago. And that is the reality, So that's what we try to focus on.
So we've got just a very brief time left, so I do want to ask you a question that's very topical, which is had a lot of this with the administration coming after, I shouldn't say coming after, questioning, where some of the colleges are. And just in a couple of seconds, what's your position on this free speech?
I think it's not so much about free speech. It's about more speech, and the job of colleges and lots of other entities in our society are to broadcast a wide range of views. That doesn't mean you have to put every conspiracy theorist on your campus.
I hear you. So it's more speech.
More speech.
Great. We appreciate that. Thank you for being with us here today. Look forward to seeing you on next week's show.